Timer says 10 seconds. Hello, everyone, and welcome to Understanding, a new kind of episode today. We're going to do a live Q&A, and we're using some technology that we're not familiar with yet. Oh, I'm going to have to turn that off so I don't get an echo. Give me 1 second. Speaking of, all right. My good friend Jackson is working with me on this, as is Juan, and I'll be talking to them if I need some help or need to communicate about any of the technology. But hopefully this will go relatively smoothly, but bear with us on this first episode, if you would. The purpose of this series is to enable just some back and forth about topics I love to talk about that I think my audience is interested in talking about too. Primarily issues in morality, objectivity, and thinking in principles, and sort of the intersection of, how do we know what's so, and how do we use that knowledge to build beautiful lives? And to me, this is the essence of philosophy. It's the essence of good philosophy, rational philosophy. I love the subject. I think about these ideas all the time. And I get to talk with my colleagues at Objective Standard Institute and at the Objective Standard about this stuff all the time. But I don't get to talk with the public about this, the people who I'm friends with at a distance that I don't work with. So that's what we're going to do today. Jackson is going to put a link in the comment thread where you can click on that link to get into a waiting room to ask me a live question if you want to just literally ask me a question verbally. If you want to type a question into the comments, I'll be reading them over there. I get easily overwhelmed with lots of text because I'm dyslexic, so bear with me on that too, but I'll do my best to read those comments and address them as well. So, Jackson, if we have someone in for a live verbal question, let's go ahead and load that up.
Yep, give me a few minutes.
While you're waiting to get someone in here, I have a question in the stream. Says, please discuss the shooting of Renee Good. Was it justified? I should say up front in this podcast that I don't watch the news and I don't even read much news because I just don't like to do that anymore. I used to read and write about current events and politics pretty regularly, and I just don't enjoy it. And I actually don't think doing that moves the needle much. So I'm focused more on morality and epistemology and the intersection there, and trying to trying to help other people and myself to learn to think more clearly, more deeply, and more in a more integrated way about those issues so that we can live beautiful lives and then also defend liberty on solid ground. But I'm much more focused on the philosophy element of this. There's this cliche. Some people say, well, I don't care about politics. And the answer comes back, well, politics is interested in you, or politics cares about you. Well, the same is true of epistemology, but even more so, epistemology and morality. You might not be interested in epistemology, but epistemology is interested in you. And I really think that's true, that we, how we know, what we can validate, what we can call genuine knowledge, how we can fight back against people who claim knowledge that isn't real, but are trying to use it for destructive purposes. That's really, really high leverage stuff. And that's what I'm much more interested in. So that said, I did watch some of these videos of the shooting of Renee Good. And to my eyes, that looked completely unjustified. I can't imagine any justification for that shooting. But legal issues are not a matter of my imagination, what I can and cannot imagine, and they're not a matter of a video where several things are going on, and there was some prior things that happened, and there's a context around this, and I don't know that full context, and probably won't be looking into it. So all I can say to that right now is that from what I saw, that shooting looked completely unjustified. It looked like just simply an execution. And I was astonished and ill to see it happen. I'll also say I don't think that ICE should even exist. So if you want my views on immigration, I've written fairly extensively about this. I wrote an article titled Individual Rights, or it's titled Immigration and Individual Rights, actually, and you can find it at the Objective Standard. And then I have a follow-up article about an objective screening process for people who want to travel to or immigrate to the United States, and how and why a screening process is objectively warranted and is not a violation of anyone's rights, contrary to what I've heard some libertarians say. So you can read more about that there, and I'm happy to take questions on immigration as well. But again, the heads up here is that I don't pay attention to the news. I'm not that interested in politics. So it doesn't mean you can't ask questions about politics. I'll take the questions, but sometimes I'm probably just going to say I don't know because I haven't been paying attention to that subject. So, okay, looks like we have Thomas in the waiting room.
Hey, Craig.
Hey, Thomas, how are you?
I'm good. How are you?
Very well.
So I want to jump to sort of the opposite extreme and go really philosophical, but I'll try and tie it back into people's values at the same time. So I've been wondering about integration. Like integration is how we take the experiences that we have of the world around us and turn them into knowledge, into understanding of the universe. And my question is there such a thing as subconscious integration? And to put that in layman's terms, is it true that your subconscious mind, the things you're not conscious of, is capable of aggregating things from across your life and integrating them into some kind of principle? An example of that would be when you kind of feel that somebody's untrustworthy or something like that. And it's because you've experienced all these other occasions of people behaving in a certain way. Is that integration? Is it something we can trust, or is it just a form of perception, and integration is only something that can happen in the conscious mind?
I would say this about that. There's definitely something there, right? We all experience this, that on a subconscious level, something goes on whereby data comes together and gets sorted out in such a way or gets integrated in such a way that it affects us. And so we know something is going on there. Now, I'm perfectly comfortable with calling that integration on a subconscious level. I could see some pushback if people were talking about the nature of consciousness as an integrating mechanism of sorts, such that when we're forming and using concepts, we're integrating to do so. And I can understand why some people might want to sort of quarantine that term just for conscious integration. But I don't think that makes sense. So I'm not warm to that idea. I'm much warmer to the idea of saying that the subconscious does some kind of integration. I mean, what on earth is a dream if it's not your subconscious integrating and actively, producing images and stories and, conversations and the like? That can't happen without integration. And that's happening when you're asleep. So yeah, I do think there is something to that. And I definitely think this has something to do with what people sometimes call intuitions. As you mentioned, you meet someone and the person seems either like Sarah and I met someone about a year ago who's become a very dear friend. And when we first met him, we both turned to each other within about 10 minutes of meeting him. And we were like, this guy's one of our people. He's just like us, and we could tell that so fast. And it was partly the way that he was handling himself and the way that he was speaking, but there was more to it than that. There was something, you sense a person's sense of life and the elements of a personality at to some extent I don't know if it's at a subconscious level, but Ayn Rand coined this phrase psychoepistemology, which is the science that studies the automatic functions of the subconscious and the conscious functions or volitional functions of the conscious mind and how they interact. Something is going on there. When we met this guy's, I can name his name is Aaron, and there was something obvious very quickly about him that seemed to come from a subconscious understanding of what was going on with him. And then the opposite happens, I think. Also, you meet someone and you're like, this guy's squirrely, I don't trust this person. And clearly your conscious mind is pulling together. I mean, you're perceiving things. You might be perceiving him being shifty, literally physically shifty, or you might perceive that that his eyes are glaring, beady or glaring away when you're trying to talk to him. He doesn't look you in the eyes at all. So some of it is perceptual and something that you can just sense at the conscious level, but there's more to it. So I would agree. What do you think? Do you tell me more about your experiences with that?
Yeah, so I had a sort of debate about this with Angel, who we both know, a couple of weeks ago, about whether or not that counts as integration, because we all agree that thing's happening. It's whether or not it's is it the same as when your conscious mind integrates data into knowledge. And I think the two need to work together and actually are both essential to the process of integration. I think there's obviously we live in this culture where there's a tendency for people too much to rely on feelings, follow their guts, or vibes or things like that. But I think in the objectivist movement, there's almost an irrational overreaction to that, where people dismiss gut feelings and vibes too much when those are really the product of a sort of process of subconscious integration that we need to listen to, but then put through a rational analysis before we act on, when we have the time to do that. Sometimes we don't.
Your senses pick up a lot more than your conscious mind is aware of. And I suspect that your brain, your subconscious, I think they're roughly the same thing, is processing a lot of that stuff in ways you're unaware of too. And it has an effect. Look, the effect of it goes two ways. Your conscious mind has an effect on your brain and your body, and your brain and your body have an effect on your conscious mind. It's a two-way street. And I really do think there's something going on there that is legitimately called integration at the subconscious level.
Mm-hmm.
It is not the same thing, though, as the kind of integration. It's not the same kind of integration that goes on when you're, when you're consciously trying to figure out, the answer to a problem, or, formulate a sentence if you're writing an article or something like that. That is a different kind of integration, but it's fed by your subconscious. Look, you can't write a sentence without tapping into your subconscious, because where are you going to get the material from, right? So it's all interacting all the time. And I think the mind, the human mind, is an integrating, mechanism's kind of the wrong term, because it's not mechanical. It's not even physical in my view. But it is an integrating thing that works directly with a physical thing, your brain. And both sides of that are doing something we can call integration, I think.
Definitely.
Yeah, good question. Thanks. And thanks for being the first live questioner on my show. This is fun.
Thanks. It's an honor.
All right, man. All right, let's see if we have any questions over here in the thread. Oh, I see. If I hover over them, they disappear. That's annoying. Okay. Maddox asks, is it ever proper to regard someone else as a means to your ends? For example, if I buy cookies from a baker, aren't I using him or her as a means to my ends, or am I unclear about the terms? Well, I use my wife as a means to my end all the time. So I certainly, if that's if there's anything wrong with that, so be it. Yeah, you the idea of not using people as a means to your end is I think most commonly attached to, and I think legitimately so, the philosophy of Immanuel Kant, who um, used that phraseology in a way that makes a lot of people think that he was in effect saying don't force people and respect people's rights and the like, but he was not implying that at all. He was implying that you should not use humanity for your ends, because humanity is the thing that everyone is supposed to sacrifice in effect for. um, Actually, it's even worse than that in Kant. You're not even supposed to sacrifice for humanity. You're supposed to sacrifice just for the sake of sacrifice. But to use someone else for your purposes is to act in a manner that is self-interested. It's to get something out of a relationship with someone. But as a rational egoist, that's precisely what I want from a relationship. I want things from my relationship. There are ends in relationships that I want. If I go rock climbing with my rock climbing buddies, I'm they're using me and I'm using them to do what? Well, when I'm climbing, one of them's belaying me, and when I'm and when I'm belaying him, he's climbing. We're using each other as a means to the end of having a blast, and using each other in that way is fine. What you don't want to do is use someone in a way that is unfair, unjust, dishonest, and especially in a way that violates rights, by initiating force against the person. So, Maddox, I think you just need to separate the ways in which people use each other. Your example about, you buy cookies from the grocer, are you using them? Yeah, you're using the fact that he was willing to bake those cookies and you didn't want to bake them. You just wanted to give $1 and get a cookie. And that was a beautiful way to have a transaction where both people gain from it. And that's the essence of rational good relationships. Everything is a trade, and the trade in a sense is very much an instance or a kind or a way of using other people for your ends. And yeah, so I would be. It's a good question, because you definitely, the thing about clear thinking is there are so many ways you can parse words, and context matters enormously. So if somebody just asks a question, is it ever, appropriate to use other people as a means to your ends? That question cannot be answered as a yes or no, really. I mean, you can just say yes and then provide the context, but if you just said yes and didn't provide the context, it would sound like you might be authorizing, the violation of rights, or dishonesty or injustice or whatever. So it's a good question, and definitely worth thinking about that kind of stuff. All right, we have someone in the waiting room here, Adina Goldstein. I know Adina. I think I've got you in here, Adina, but I don't see you. Are you hearing me?
Is there a place?
Adina, your mic isn't working for Craig. Can you turn it off and on again?
Done?
Still can't hear you.
Is this better?
No, cannot hear you.
I can
Barely
say
hearing you, not enough to. Why don't you try to work that out, Adina, and we'll let you back in. We'll put you to the front of the line if you can get that worked out.
all right.
Oh, and Seamus says he can hear her. That's interesting. Okay. Well, we'll figure it out. We anticipated having a few technical difficulties today, and that could be on our end. But let's see if if Adina can figure out something on her end. Okay, let me see what else I have here in the stream. All right. I should be taking these in order, so let me make sure I do that. Okay, Seamus. Can one live by principles without ever identifying one's principles explicitly? In a sense, yes, and in a sense, no. And you can see this take the principles of grammar. If you are raised in a family and an environment where proper grammar is generally spoken, you're going to pick up and use proper grammar. You're going to speak with proper grammar. Now, you don't know necessarily the principles of grammar yet. And if you learn the principles of grammar, that's going to help you to be more, articulate and speak more clearly and better and write better, obviously. But you can definitely function, and you're in a sense, you're obeying the principles of grammar, or not obeying them, but you're upholding the principles of grammar, but you don't know what they are. Now, you're not consciously upholding them, so let's bring that into the equation. You can enact the principles without knowing that you're doing it, in effect, because you learned how to put words together into sentences with a subject and a verb and an object in a certain way. Once you learn those principles, you can do it consciously and explicitly. So there's an issue of doing it implicitly and subconsciously, and doing it consciously and explicitly. But I think you can definitely say that that's the case. So, for instance, someone might not know, will go away from grammar and go to a moral issue. A child might not know the correct definition of honesty. In fact, very few adults know the correct definition of honesty. A lot of people think that honesty is the virtue of not lying or never telling a lie. But that's not a sufficient definition for honesty. Honesty is a much deeper and richer and more meaningful virtue. It's the virtue of refusing to pretend that facts are other than they are. Telling a lie sometimes can be, perfectly legitimate. Somebody, brown coats come looking for Anne Frank, and you tell them, no, she's not in my attic. It's a lie, and it's the right thing to do. Why? Because you're not pretending that facts are other than they are. The Nazis are pretending that facts are other than they are. So the dishonesty, the vice is on them, not on you. When a child learns the nature of honesty, it depends on whether he learns it sort of inductively himself by realizing, oh, if I tell my friends one thing and it's not true, it disrupts my relationship with them. If I pretend that facts are other than they are, my friends don't like that. It causes relationship problems. If I pretend that leaving my bike out in the rain is not going to have consequences, I later find out that it does, right? He does a few things like this, and he starts to induce the principle on some level that if you fake reality, you get burned by doing it. The burn might not come immediately, but it's not good to fake reality because that's where you live. So you want to keep your mind connected to that place. So if a child learns it that way, he's learning it correctly, and he may not be able to define reality as the virtue of refusing to fake reality or refusing to pretend that facts are other than they are. But if he's actually induced it, he knows it on some level. So there's no question that he can enact and even understand to some extent the virtue before he has a correct definition for it. And if you think about the way that concepts are formed, and I know Matt or Seamus, you know this, the last thing you do in concept formation is create the definition. the formation of the concept, the core aspects of the formation of the concept come way prior to that. They begin with observation of similarities and differences, and then a reason to acknowledge similarities and differences among things. So there's a human need element involved here. All of that is taking place way before anyone is defining or fully acknowledging, a principle. So yeah, that's a great question, and my unfortunately long-winded answer there is that I think it is possible to live by principles to some extent and in a certain respect without knowing them explicitly. Now that said, how much better is it to know your principles explicitly, to know how they're derived from reality, how they're anchored in reality and the requirements of human life, and then have a degree of certainty and clarity, including a correct definition. Oh yeah, don't fake reality because it cannot work for you. It cannot serve your purposes. That is so much better than holding the false definition, never tell a lie, or not having any kind of a definition. Just, that thing I experienced a couple times, that I drew some vague conclusion about. So the bottom line is the way that philosophic principles work best for us is when we do the work to induce them and actually own them, and then clearly define them, and then use them explicitly in our lives. And that is the magic sauce for living a beautiful life. So, okay. We've got Randy East in the waiting room. Let's bring him in. Hi, Randy. I don't see you, but I'm wondering if you're hearing me. Maybe not. Jackson, I could not see or hear Randy, so.
I'm investigating. I think I have a solution. Give me 1 second.
Okay, I'll take another question from the queue over here.
Craig, Randy, can you try speaking now?
Oh, now I see Randy.
Yeah. Randy, oh, there you go.
Can you hear me now?
Yes, there we go. Oops, but now he disappeared.
All right. Are you able to hear me?
I can, but I'm no longer seeing you for some reason.
I don't know. I guess you can't hear me.
That's all right. We can hear
I
you.
apologize.
We can hear you. Okay, now he can't hear us. Okay.
All right, we'll get this stuff worked out. Jackson, I'm going to let you work on that while I look at another question over here. You have a lightning calculator, but the answer needs you to apply it properly.
Hold on.
That's a statement, not a question, for Distance University. Is Randy back?
Yeah, we can hear it. Randy, we can hear you, but I don't think he can hear us.
Hello.
I don't know why. Yeah, okay.
Yeah, there may be a
Hello.
disconnect. I'm going to remove him, Jackson, for now, and you guys let me know if you get that worked out. And apologize just for these technical issues are likely on our end, but we'll get them worked out. Okay. Hey, Craig, are borderline cases a threat to differentiation? No. The thing about borderline cases that is interesting, so for people who don't know, a borderline case is, I think this person, I'm not going to be able to, it's Shelby Hawkins asked this. A borderline case, I think Shelby is talking about in epistemology. So when you're trying to form a concept, and the easiest way to think of this is the color wheel. If you're smack dab in the middle of blue, you can say, yes, this is blue. You move a little bit to either side, and yeah, this is still blue. Eventually, you're going to get to, you're going to get to what you're going to want to call green. And then the question is, at that borderline, is it, is this in some way going to undermine the possibility that we can say with certainty that there's such thing as blue and there's such thing as green, and that we can form concepts, even though there are borderline cases. Well, the thing about when people try to attack objectivity of concept formation, or even objectivity of principle formation, with borderline cases, is that the borderline can't exist without the center case, right? There's no such thing as a borderline between blue and green if blue and green are not known. It's the same issue when people say, well, everything's gray, everyone's gray, there's no such thing as moral black and white. Well, what does gray mean if you don't have black and white? Where does gray come from? It's a mixture of what? Right? So it's the same kind of thing. Borderline cases can only exist because there is a center case, blue or green or red or whatever, where you can say this is absolutely the case, or and you can think of this in terms of think of a case about the initiation of force. We'll go there. So, if you're walking down the street and you accidentally bump someone with your shoulder, have you initiated force against the person? Well, it's an accident and you bumped him presumably lightly and nothing happened. No one is going to stop there and go, oh my God, you initiated force against this person, and make a federal case of it, right? No, you're not going to he's not going to call the police. And if he did, it would be, it would just be laughed at. But at some point, the degree of force that someone uses against someone, even if it's accidental, right? If you accidentally run into someone with your car, that's going to be a different thing. So where between those things do we draw the line? It's an interesting question, but wherever we're going to draw the line, and legal scholars have their work cut out to draw these kinds of lines, but wherever we draw the line, it doesn't change the fact that running into someone with your car and breaking his back is different from bumping someone accidentally while walking down the street and causing no harm. One of them is a rights violation of sorts, even if it's accidental, and the other one is not a rights violation. So good, it's a good question, but there's no question that it does that borderline cases not only don't undermine core cases, they're made possible by core cases. All right, Adina is back in the stage. Let's see if we can get her. Hello, Adina, can you hear me?
Now I can.
Wonderful, and I can hear you.
All right, my question is quite short. Actually, is it necessary for rational people to forgive those that have wronged them? Like, is there a unchristian rational form of forgiveness that exists?
So, I mean, the quick answer is definitely no, that it's not necessary to forgive people who have wronged you. But let's work with an example. Do you have, and if it's a personal example and you don't want to share names or you want to doctor it so that you're not giving something away, that's fine. But can you give me a concrete instance of the kind of violation and forgiveness that you're thinking of?
I don't know. Say someone you were really close with, stole a lot of money from you.
Yeah, I think that kind of thing is unforgivable unless there were some mitigating circumstances. So I can paint a picture. Let's say I'm friends with someone and he becomes addicted to meth or something. And in some, crazed meth high, he, breaks into my house or something and steals stuff from me. And later is, apologizes and works to get cleaned up and get off of meth and get his life back in order. There are circumstances like that can make a real difference. could conceivably forgive someone. And it might even really be the right thing to do to forgive someone, depending on how important this person is to you as a friend or a colleague or whatever he or she is to you. But there are definitely wrongs that cannot be forgiven. Murder cannot be forgiven. If somebody, I think, if someone murders your child or your husband or wife or something, that forgiveness is out of the question. And I know that Christianity holds that you should forgive people for anything, and I think that that's morally obscene. Personally, I think that I would never forgive anyone for that. I would not forgive anyone for any serious assault on me or any of my friends or loved ones. I don't forgive anyone for an assault, especially if it's not, drug induced or to have some other kind of circumstance that might mitigate it, depending. And not every use of drugs mitigates what you do while on drugs, but there are, I already gave one case on that. But if someone violates rights or does a wrong that is clearly premeditated and a genuine act of evasion, that's a dangerous person, and forgiving him doesn't serve any purpose. He doesn't deserve forgiveness. He isn't going to, it's not going to make your life better to forgive him. Now, there can be circumstances where you want to let go of something. And I know that when Charlie Kirk was murdered a few months ago, his wife forgave the shooter, and she did this I think at some conference, and it was it was televised and everything. And I think that is morally wrong to do, but I also think that when people do that kind of thing, sometimes what they're doing it for, they could be doing it for one of at least, they could be doing it because the Bible told them to, and so they're going to do it, or their preachers told them to, so they're going to do it. That's a wrong reason to do it. If the person is doing it because what she really means by it is, I need to let this go, and my means of letting it go is to say, I forgive this person. I wouldn't advise that language. I think it's the wrong language. I think you could just say, I need to let this go. I'm going to condemn this person once and let that be the end of it. And then I'm going to try not to think of him again. And I think that's better than forgiving. So anyway, that's a bit long-winded. Adina, do you have any kind of a circumstance in mind that we could put on the table that would get more to your concern?
No, you got to my concern already. You voiced exactly how I was dealing with it. Although instead of letting go, I was saying, let karma and the universe deal with them, because my life is awesome without them, and better without them.
Yeah, that's really interesting that you bring up karma, because karma, I think, is it's I think it's some kind of an Eastern mysticism term, but there's something, and I know you're not advocating it, but what's interesting about it is that I have recently become a bit of a Swiftie. I've Taylor Swift's new album, Life of a Showgirl. Yeah, I know. I'm getting kudos from a lot of people, and I'll probably get beat up someday for acknowledging all of this. But anyway, I love that album, and because of that, my daughter and a few other people have been giving us Taylor Swift playlists from her older stuff that I didn't really know anything about. And she's got a song that I just listened to last night, and it might even be titled something about karma. But anyway, the lyrics in it are about karma, but the way that she's using it, and I think the way that you use it, is that it's the law of causality is what it really is. If you act in bad ways, if you act in anti-life, irrational ways, those those instances of doing that and the soul that you create by doing that are going to come back to haunt you. They just are, and it's the way that the world is. And so I think a lot of people use karma to mean that. So it's a bit of a package deal because it's kind of packaged together with Eastern mysticism nonsense, packaged in with a recognition of the fact that things are what they are and they act in accordance with their natures. And if you ruin your soul by acting in bad ways, you're going to have a bad life for doing it. And if you ruin relationships by acting in bad ways, that's going to cause you problems in your life. So I'm glad you brought up karma because I can tie it into that. And I think I don't think there's any harm in using that phrase that way. But just, as long as you know you're not talking.
All right. I'm
Miss-
glad I have the Craig Biddle stamp of approval for using it that way. Thank you.
Well, I'll use it that way too. Thanks, Adina. It's good to hear from you.
Good to hear from you too. See you in July. Actually,
Wonderful.
this time.
Yeah, Adina is talking about the Objective Standard Institute's Level Up Conference, which is going to be in Chicago this July, I believe, 8 through 11. If you don't know anything about that yet, go check it out. Let's just search Level Up conferences and you'll find all the info about it. It's going to be wonderful. All right, looks like Randy is back in the saddle here. Let's see if we can get him on. Randy, can you hear me? Randy?
Randy, are you there? Looks like he's still having audio issues.
Okay, I'll remove and we'll go to a see if you can get that worked out and let him know that we'll bring him on another show if for some reason things don't work out today. All right, any thoughts to share on OSI classes, events, including Level Up? Well, I just mentioned Level Up. And yeah, there are lots of courses in the hopper. I actually have been head down in some other projects and I don't know all of the courses that are in the hopper. So I just recommend going to the website there, going to objectivestandard.org and see what is there. I know there are a few courses underway right now. I know Kaya Willis is doing a reading group on Ayn Rand's Capitalism, the Unknown Ideal. Tim White is doing a listening group on Leonard Peikoff's History of Philosophy. And I think there's at least one other course underway right now, and then there are several in the pipeline. So yeah, go check that out there. Let's see, what does rational, not Christian forgiveness look like? I think we already talked about that a little bit, but I could say just another brief word on it. I think rational forgiveness consists in, first of all, just really understanding and doing the thinking necessary to determine by your own judgment whether the person deserves forgiveness. Forgiveness is something you're giving to someone who has done something wrong, and if that thing is really wrong, you shouldn't give forgiveness if it's wrong beyond a certain point. We already talked about borderline cases, and there are definitely borderline cases in these kinds of things, and those are difficult. But it's just be thoughtful. How important is this person and this relationship to you? How wrong was the wrong that the person did? How big a transgression was this? Did the person know what he or she was doing, or was this possibly an error of ignorance rather than a breach of morality? You just have to do that thinking, and sometimes it's helpful to talk to someone about it. If you have a good friend, I'm fortunate that I have a wonderful wife and a lot of people around I get to talk to about ideas and this kind of stuff all the time. If you don't have that, it's good to try to build those kinds of friends. And one way you can do that, by the way, is coming to Objective Standard Institute conferences and taking our courses. because you meet people who take ideas seriously and want and would want to talk about this kind of thing. But there's not much you can say about these kinds of questions, again, without putting an instance on the table, without putting a fact on the table, because otherwise the yes or no is it just kind of rings hollow. All right, question from Seamus. I do work for OSI, but my question was genuine. Oh, yeah. Well, I think several people here are either work at or engaged with OSI, and that's nothing wrong with them coming here and asking questions. And I know your question was definitely sincere. I was just thinking that oh, okay. There are some things in here that are not questions, and I'm going to have to, with my dyslexic self, sort of read through these and figure out what to address. Hey, Craig, I've heard many conflicting points on this in the objectivist sphere. Are the use of recreational drugs and porn consistent with objectivist principles? I have yet to be convinced they are. Well, we'll take drugs first. So I wake up every morning and the first thing I do is take a drug, caffeine. And I love it. I've been drinking strong black coffee for many, many years, and it's a joy in my life. From at least some of the nutritionists I've heard talk about this, and I'm certainly no expert in that area. It's even good for me. It's got antioxidants in it, and other things. So there's that. And then we can go to the other extreme. Snorting cocaine or eating ecstasy or taking mushrooms. Here's the thing. Actions are right or wrong by reference to a principle. So if it is wrong ever to take a recreational drug, then there has to be a principle by reference to which it's wrong. It's not just wrong because someone said so, and it's not just wrong because we feel that it's wrong or it seems wrong, right? It's wrong by principle. And then right and wrong have to be applied in context. So I've already given a context where I wake up every morning and have a cup of coffee, which is a drug. And I drink wine on occasion. I have a glass of wine or two almost every night. Sometimes I'll skip that, but and I drink very small glasses, but I enjoy that, and that's a drug. I have experimented with several drugs throughout my life. I've smoked marijuana, I've done cocaine, I've tried mushrooms, I've tried ecstasy. I haven't done any of the strong stuff in many, many years. But I don't think there's anything morally wrong with trying those things if you use your head about it. What's morally wrong is to be irrational. And drinking alcohol, if someone wants to say, and I hear people say this, mushrooms and those things, those are bad, but my alcohol, that's just fine. But by what standard? Alcohol ruins lives on a regular basis. Alcoholics are some of the most miserable people in the world. Alcohol is one of the worst drugs there is. Right. And I don't know much about the other drugs. I just don't know. I mean, Tim Ferriss and a few other people really are high on, not high in the sense of stoned, but they're big on psilocybin right now. And I'm extremely curious about what's going on in psilocybin research, because from what I've read, and I am no expert on this, but from what I've read, there appears to be a huge amount of really good research on how psilocybin can help people with PTSD, and other psychological ailments to better their lives. And typically these are done with monitored dosings and the like, and you work with a therapist. Now this isn't recreational, but I'm just fleshing out my thinking on this as I'm thinking out loud. it is morally obscene that the government stands between psychologists or psychiatrists and people with psychological problems whose problems might be solvable with certain drugs, but the government's like, no, we'll tell you when and if you can take drugs, as if people in the government have any clue what is right for you or me or what your doctor or my doctor should prescribe. They know nothing. So there's that. And then if we step outside of that into recreational usage, what is wrong with having a couple beers when you go out to a bar with your buddies? Okay, then what's wrong with taking a hit off of a joint when you're relaxing one day and you want to feel just completely in the groove with some music you're going to listen to, and it's more enjoyable if you have a buzz. I don't see anything wrong with that. And if people want to, if people want to say that there is something wrong with that, the onus is on them to produce the principle by reference to which it is. Now, if a drug demonstrably harms your brain, that's, I mean, that then it's crazy to take that drug. I don't think playing football makes sense given the research and the evidence on the hits that football players take and the brain damage done there. So we can just jump to another track for a second. But I would never advocate that anybody experiment with anything that's really, really dangerous. So you have to look into it. You have to use your own thinking on this stuff and do the research. And if you're breaking the law, you're taking that, that's a danger in and of itself. I think there are some places you can take some of these drugs. I know in California, marijuana is legal, obviously now, and several other states. As for porn, it really depends on how you define porn, which is notoriously hard to define. Instead of diving right into that, let me just say that the best way to think about this question is to bear in mind how profoundly beautiful and important sex is. Sex is one of the first of all, it's probably the most enjoyable thing. I certainly can't think of anything more enjoyable in life, especially if you are enjoying it with someone you adore and have enormous connection with, and you're doing it in ways that is just, like harmony on steroids. So there's that. Like, this is what I mean. Sex is a celebration of life and love of life with someone you love, and it involves an ecstasy on another level. That's beautiful, and it has been beat up so long by so many foul philosophies, especially religion, that people can't even think clearly about sex anymore, or many people can't. And because they can't, and because they feel ashamed about it, and they for goodness sakes, people feel ashamed to masturbate when they're in their early teens and they start getting into it. They're like, oh, I'm not supposed to be doing this because my parents, teachers told me I shouldn't do this. I mean, all the repression that is involved in people's thinking about sex creates this situation where some people get relief from this pent up frustration by looking at nudes of other people, and maybe even some people having sex. If there's no coercion going on there, and if the people doing it are in their right minds, they're not, just drugged out so that they can do this thing that they hate doing, but they're just doing it for money. I mean, that's obviously wrong. I again would say someone is going to have to point to the principle by reference to which this is wrong. Now, I'm talking about adults here, obviously. Underaged, children and underaged people are obviously out of the equation for this kind of thing. But if you're talking about adults, it's very difficult for me to see where and how I can say this is wrong unless it's done in a way that is truly detrimental and demonstrably detrimental. I'll bring up another example here that's this one from a TV show. One of my favorite series is called Boston Legal. And in one of the episodes, or actually a few episodes, there's this woman who is, I forget what they call her, but she's basically a sex therapist who has sex with her clients to help them learn to relax and learn to experience sex. And she's working with people who are so awkward. And one guy in particular who has who's on the autism spectrum. I think that in the show they say he has Asperger's, and she works with him to try to help him get over his awkwardness and his fear of sex. This poor guy wants to have relationships with women, but he's so eaten up about his fears about this and his insecurities that he can't do it. And this sex therapist who works with him by actually engaging in sex with him and talking him through it is able to help him out and help him learn how to experience this so that he can then later have a relationship with a woman, which he does later in the show. Now, again, this is fiction. This is a television show, and I'm just using this as an example. But my guess is this is a very real thing. I certainly know I know plenty of young people in particular, but also older people who are extremely awkward about sex, and it's largely because of the horrid way in which sex is talked about and thought about and portrayed in human beings' lives. So I'm very cautious to say no or shake a finger at say this is wrong, or to shake a finger at people who engage in certain kinds of pornography. If by pornography you mean looking at other people enjoying themselves having sex, I don't care for it. I also have an extremely good life with my wife. I don't have a need for that, and if I did and wanted to do it, I would probably go see, and I don't think people should feel ashamed of that. I am worried, and the last thing I'll say on this, I do worry about the people who are in that industry, particularly the women, who I think sometimes are there because they can't make ends meet in other ways, or because they have psychological problems, or because they're sort of under psychological duress, if you will, by people who want to exploit them. And I know there's a huge amount of that stuff that goes on. I don't know the details on it, but I've heard and read a few articles about it over the years, and that's obviously horrifying. So you have to separate that stuff too. But anyway, I think that's a good question, and hopefully that answer goes somewhere.
Hey, Craig.
Yes.
So we don't have anyone in the waiting room to speak with you right now, but Randy was unable to get his audio to work, but he did leave a written comment in the chat. So I just wanted to bring that up to you to prioritize. Let me find the comment right now. It's from East Tactics. He said, "Hey, Craig, was curious, since I understand that you're an atheist, I was wondering for you what the most compelling reason to believe in God is, and why you decided that you don't believe in God."
Okay. Yeah. My father is an Episcopal minister, so I was raised in a religious family. Now, Episcopalians are kind of the hippies of Christianity. They don't take it too seriously. And my father was a very loving man. I had a lovely upbringing. He was not a Bible thumper, and he didn't make me, go to church. I went voluntarily to church until I was about 12. For two reasons. There were pretty girls there with dresses, and I was insanely attracted to girls starting in about first grade. So I don't know. I think I was a weird kid. Anyway, pretty girls were there in pretty dresses, and I was like, that's where I'm going. So I was there for that. And then I also pretended to sing in the choir, and the pretense was an agreement with the choir master because my voice was so bad. And I loved the music. I loved the choral music. So I loved being in the choir, but when I sang, it like ruined everything. So I would just mouth the words, and I had a wink with the choir master. So that's why I went to church. when I turned, I think I was around 12, when I really started to realize that the whole thing that I would never took very seriously anyway, but that it was literal just nonsense. There was no reason to believe in God. There was no evidence for God. It was just a silly story. And I wasn't getting any value of it. So I declared, sort of my atheism at about 12 years old. However, the thing it's easy to make that decision because there's just no evidence for God, and the whole idea, if you start to really think about it, it's just kind of silly. What I didn't repudiate is altruism, the moral code that comes with religion. I had swallowed that hook, line, and sinker, and that stuck with me, frankly, until I read Ayn Rand and got my head around the truth and the value of rational egoism and what that's all about. So that was my long, hard climb out of a bad place, is just repudiating altruism and learning that egoism is true, and that altruism there's no more supporting altruism than there is supporting the existence of God. Both of them are supported by literally nothing. So that was the more difficult thing for me. You had another part in this question. I was wondering, what do I think is the most compelling reason to believe in God? I know this sounds like a cop-out, because you should be able to say, oh, look, here's the strong man, the steel man argument for my opponents, and I should be able to say that. But I do not, when you look into the arguments for God, they just peter out one after the other within the frame of a few questions. It will take a couple of examples. So, take the argument that, well, God must exist because otherwise who created the universe? So the argument from creation. Well, why do we have to assume anyone created the universe to begin with? Why can't we just assume that the universe is eternal, which has just always been, A? And B, if you take the premise that that if something exists, it has to have been created, then if God exists, he has to have been created. And of course, religionists go, no. We got to stop somewhere. And this is just called special pleading. It's just a logical fallacy. So there's that. And then if you go to something like, what is the ontological argument? If you imagine the most perfect being of all, and then imagine him not existing, and then imagine him existing, which one is better? Which one is more perfect? And this is like St. Anselm's silly argument. And this argument is so stupid because better or perfect, any evaluative term like that, presupposes an answer to the question, better for what purpose and by what standard? Perfect for what purpose and by what standard? And unless you can answer those questions, you're using the words better and perfect as floating abstractions. You don't know what they mean. And so these terms just don't carry any, the arguments don't carry any water. They just don't. And in my view, pretty much every argument for God comes down to either an arbitrary assertion. They're just God exists, and you can't prove he doesn't. And then that you can't prove he doesn't is an instance of what's called the argument from ignorance. It's like, you're ignorant about the way to prove that God doesn't exist, and I'm going to use your ignorance as evidence that he does exist, right? So this is or they'll say, how did life come into existence? If you can't say how life came into existence, that is, if you're ignorant of this explanation, then I'm going to use that ignorance as evidence for the existence of God, right? But ignorance is not evidence. They're different things. That's why we have two different concepts for these things. And so that's an instance, and you'll find this all over the place when you're arguing with religionists. They treat your ignorance about something as evidence for God. So just bear that one in mind. And then the other one is stolen concepts, which is a fallacy identified by Ayn Rand, where people say things like, well, if God doesn't exist, then where are we going to get the laws of identity and causality, right? And this is called the transcendental argument for God, the idea that if the laws of logic hold, somebody must have made them, there must be a lawmaker who made these things. But as soon as someone says the question, well, how or why or anything like that, he is presupposing the primacy of existence and a reality to which we're going to refer to answer the questions that we have about things. That's the end of the road. That's why we have things like the law of identity and the law of causality and the other laws of logic. So, in my view, those three arguments, arbitrary assertions, the appeal to ignorance, and stolen concepts, and the stolen concept there is they're using concepts like, why and how and can you, explain. All of those words are stolen concepts if the person is denying the primacy of existence, the primacy of a solid reality in which things are what they are, act in accordance with their natures, and we can recourse to that reality in order to understand it and explain things. And if they're going to say, no, that can't be the end of the line, then they're using all of these concepts which depend on that foundation while simultaneously denying that that is the foundation. And that's why it's called a stolen concept. So I just don't think there are any good arguments for God, certainly not any longer. I think if you were alive, back in Thomas Aquinas's time, and certainly if you were alive way back when Aristotle thought that, well, because motion exists in the universe, there must be a first cause of the first motion. And that was sort of his thinking on that. But even that, we don't need a first cause of a first motion if we recognize that things are what they are and they act in accordance with their identities. And then the universe is eternal. There have always been things. They've always had natures and identities, and they've always acted in accordance with those natures and identities. There's no reason to believe otherwise. And there's a world of reason to believe that that's the way things have always been, because we don't have any evidence to the contrary. And when you look around, that's just the way things are. So for more on this kind of stuff, for anyone who's listening, and this may all sound kind of new, Objectivism, Ayn Rand's philosophy, is full of answers to these kinds of things. Her book, Introduction to Objectivist Epistemology, gets into a lot of this. Her book, Philosophy Who Needs It, gets into a lot of it. And then a book by her colleague, Leonard Peikoff, that's titled Objectivism, the Philosophy of Ayn Rand, is really a systematic presentation of her philosophy, and it's very good. And he gets into the nuts and bolts of these kinds of things, the primacy of existence, and why arguments for God are just a violation of this one principle that you just can't get around. He gets into stolen concepts, and I don't think he mentions the argument from ignorance in there, but he definitely he gets into what an arbitrary assertion is. So I recommend looking there for more on that. But bottom line, yeah, I don't think there are good, compelling reasons to believe in God. I've never heard one. So.
All right. Craig, nobody's in the waiting room right now, but we have a written question from Raja. And he says, in your experience interacting with ChatGPT, did you come across an intelligent, unexpected, rational response that astounded you? So effectively going to the intelligence of AI.
I'm astonished by what, and I use ChatGPT primarily of all the AIs out there. I've experimented with some of the others, but I find Chat more user-friendly for me. I'm astonished at how valuable discussions with him can be about various things, and how much information he can deliver, and how rapidly and accurately in many cases. So yeah, I'm definitely astonished by AI, and I love it. I think it's just, and I think it's increasing productivity in ways that probably most economists are not really yet grokking. And I think it bodes well for the future technologically and in terms of wealth creation, because I think it's going to turn the very productive people in this world into uber productive people. And it's going to turn the less productive people into more productive people. And I think we're going to see an enormous boon because of that. So I love it and I'm astonished by it. All of that said, artificial intelligence is not intelligent. It just isn't. It's a machine. It's a very sophisticated machine, but it's a machine just like your 1970s ITT calculator was a machine. It's built in such a way that if you do this with it, it does that thing next. And the number of variables involved in what's going on with AI is what makes it seem like it's not a machine, because it's just this enormously rich integration of technology and queries and speed that functions at a level that frankly I'm just in awe of, and I'm mostly in awe of the people who created it. That's where the intelligence is. The intelligence lies with these geeks to whom I bow, by the way. Geeks, I love you. You guys are the gods, and thank you for all you do. Anyway, these guys who are building this stuff, that's where the intelligence is. They're building a machine that I can pull out of my pocket and ask a question and go on a walk and have a conversation with him about, some philosopher I'm interested in thinking through the ideas of or whatever. And they deliver mostly accurate stuff. My wife, Sarah, catches AI erring more than any person I've ever met. She catches them all the time. And it's mostly things like asking questions about movies and dates of things and what soundtrack was in something. They're not good at that stuff. And I don't know why, but they're really good at, historical events, series, what happened chronologically in some aspect of history or in philosophy. So I love it and I'm blown away by it. So good question. I'll have more to say on AI over time because I love it and I use it all the time. I'm no expert on how it works. I have some tech friends who have explained it to me, and I think I roughly understand some of the things they've said, but they are way smarter than I am on that, and I can't track it all. But I can use it. I have enough brain power to use the stuff, and it's awesome. All right. Let's see if there are any other questions.
Yes, you have one written
Someone
question.
says, that's Maddox, says, regarding psilocybin, there's a good documentary based off a book called How to Change Your Mind. That's about the positive effects of this active compound in magic mushrooms. I had seen that there was that documentary out. I haven't seen it yet, but I want to watch that because I'm very curious about that. Somebody else says, shrooms and weed helped me with my medicinal problem of being lame. A medicinal problem of being lame. Interesting. Let's see. I love you, Craig, 100%. Thank you, Existence University. That's very nice. Beat up. Trying to see if there are actual questions in here. Is that the one with Shatner? Yes, you're asking about Boston Legal. It's got William Shatner and oh my God, who's the guy who plays Alan Shore? He's so good. I'm really bad with names of actors. I can't remember. It's in my top 5 television series ever. And all you have to do is watch the first episode of Boston Legal. If you don't like that episode, you're not going to like the show. But that episode is a work of art in and of itself, just the first episode. It's absolutely beautiful. Now, it's got leftist politics in it galore, including in that first episode. I just set it aside. I don't care because the show is so good in terms of characterization. The writing is amazing, brilliantly written, beautifully acted, and really good. I highly recommend that. see if anything else is in here.
Craig, we have a live caller.
Oh, good, because I'm seeing a lot of comments in here, but fewer questions. All right, who do we have in there? Mark. Okay, hello, Mark.
Hi, Craig. Let me know if you can hear me.
I can, just fine.
Great. Thank you so very much for the work you've done in spreading objectivism over the last many, many decades, as well as helping others, us OSI and otherwise students live productive, rational lives. My questions were actually, for me, I do have to be a little short, given an event that I'm heading to. But I wanted to inquire about I guess first mainly about like what to make of the division between rational thought and mysticism, like both how you would describe it, like either in layman's terms or in the force of objectivism, and whether there's any, and whether there is or will be a need to confront some of the negative externalities and anti-human developments, like in politics, culture, interpersonal relations that have come out of it, as well as any suggested reading that you would recommend from Rand, objectivists, or others on the same. I know that OSI has some reading groups and the like, that some of which have started or will be starting soon, and I'd like to ask like your thoughts.
Sure. Yeah, I mean, you started by asking just about what mysticism, what effects on people's lives in the culture mysticism has, and it's devastating. I mean, mysticism is the villain of today's world, and it comes in essentially two forms, in my view. It comes in religious form, where people pretend that faith is a means of knowledge, that just believing something makes it so. And very few religionists will accept that that's the definition of faith. Very often they say, oh, no, faith doesn't mean that. It means trust, or it means belief, or whatever. And those are just stolen concepts when they use them that way, because what does belief mean? Belief means acceptance of something as true, which is essentially what it means to say you're accepting it as knowledge. And what does it mean to trust that something is the case? It means to accept that the thing is true. It means essentially knowledge. So I've had many discussions with religious people who do not want to define faith as acceptance of ideas in the absence of evidence, acceptance of ideas as true in the absence of evidence, or treating faith as, in which case they're treating faith as a means of knowledge, but that's what they're doing. So that's really bad, because it makes people do all sorts of crazy things. If faith is a means of knowledge, if just believing something to be true makes it true, then anything you just believe to be true is by that fact true, which means you should act accordingly, which means jihadists who just believe that Allah wants them to convert or kill, infidels and unbelievers, they should do that. How do they know? They know by faith. If faith is a means of knowledge, that's true, and they should do it. How are you going to answer that? Or, any genuine Bible believing Jews or Christians, Leviticus says to kill homosexuals. And if you accept that God exists, and this is the word of God, and we're supposed to act on the word of God, and you accept all of that on faith, which is the only way you can accept it, because there's no evidence for God. There's no evidence, much less evidence for his will emanating, moral commandments. So what are you going to do? Well, now, one thing you can do is you can pull the teeth on that religion. And over time in the West, that's what has happened, is that Christianity and Judaism have basically become watered down versions of their actual nature. And thank goodness they have been, or thank God, we could even say. That people don't take those hard religions seriously. But a lot of Muslims today still do take their religion seriously. So we can see what happens when people pretend that faith is a means of knowledge. So that's one kind of mysticism. The other kind of mysticism is the pretense that that consensus is a means of knowledge. Remember that mysticism, the definition of mysticism is the acceptance of any non-rational, non-evidence-based means of knowledge. So, and the reason, so it's contrasted with reason. Reason is our means of knowledge, and it functions by means of perceptual observation, conceptual integration, and the laws of logic. Things are what they are. They act in accordance with their natures. A thing can't be A and non-A at the same time in the same respect, et cetera, right? There are the laws of, like, those are the principles by which we think when we're using reason. Faith is one form of mysticism, and treating consensus, what the group holds as true, as a means of knowledge is just another kind of mysticism. It's non-rational. It's not based on evidence and logic and integration. It's based on what? It's based on consensus. That's not, a consensus is not observation, evidence, and logic. A consensus is just agreement of some group. And this is what identity politics is all about. And basically all of postmodernism is all about. It's the idea that there are no individuals, there's just groups, and every group is in a power struggle with all the other groups. And you know what's true and good and right for you. How? By turning to your group and seeing what they say. That's it. Well, that's not a rational means of knowledge. It's not a means of knowledge at all. All it's a means of doing is finding out the consensus of some group. So those are the two, in my estimate, those are the two most virulent forms of mysticism today: faith and consensus. And you can call them people of faith, people of consensus, and the third alternative, which is the correct alternative, people of reason. Be a person of reason, and don't let the people of faith and the people of consensus get away with pretending that consensus and faith are a means of knowledge. They're not, and everyone, including them, knows this on some level. This is why I think it's really worth calling it out at this level. I'm not saying that no one can be religious or confused about the existence of God or anything like that innocently. I think you can be, because I even know people who were holding, well, obviously there has to be a God, because otherwise who created the universe? That's an attempt to reason, and people can be genuinely and innocently mistaken about that kind of thing. But no one can be innocently mistaken about whether just believing something makes it so. That's faith. And no one can be innocently mistaken about whether, well, everyone agrees on it, so that makes it so. I mean, certainly not if you're an adult who has a functioning mind. You can't be mistaken on those things. So mysticism is the enemy today. It's the reason for all the bad stuff going on in the world. I said earlier that, there's the cliche, you might not be interested in politics, but politics is interested in you. The real issue is you might not be interested in epistemology, but epistemology is interested in you. And here's why it's interested in you. Because if people can accept things on faith, then they can do whatever the hell they want to do. If faith is a means of knowledge, anything goes. They can attack Jews at a rave and slaughter thousands of people and take innocent people captive and rape and mutilate them. Who's to say it's wrong? They have faith that it's right. So there's that. And then there's the resurgence today of socialism, which is a form of mysticism. It's the idea that society, the group, is the unit of moral and political concern and is the source ultimately of knowledge of right and wrong, good and bad. Certainly not going to be the individual. Under a socialist society, you can't go, hey, I know you guys have all these laws and you have this structure where, the government's going to own the property and everything, but I disagree because I did some thinking and it seems to me that if I build something, I should own it. So I'm going to say I'm not participating. This doesn't go over well in a socialist society. Why? Because they don't regard the individual as important to begin with. And whatever the individual is claiming is his means of knowledge just gets brushed aside because they know in quotation marks, they know that the way that we know is by reading the consensus. We say, hey, group, what do we want to do? We want to take the property from the working class. I mean, from the business owning class and give it to the working class? Yes, we do want to do that. Oh, well, that's our logic. So that's what we're going to do. That's called Marxism. So yeah, mysticism is the worst thing in the world, and it's the cause of pretty much every bad thing in the world. So as for what to read about that, I wrote an article titled Reason versus Mysticism, published in the Objective Standard a couple of years ago, that gets into some of this. Ayn Rand's, everything by Ayn Rand touches on this. That's every book, even her fiction, gets into the issues of mysticism versus reason. Her book Philosophy, Who Needs It, I think is one of the underrated books of hers, and it's definitely one of the most underrated books in the world. So I strongly recommend that. Obviously, Virtue of Selfishness is good. And if you want to get into her epistemology, which is where really everything bottoms out in terms of understanding, her book Introduction to Objectivist Epistemology is just gold. And you can read it and reread it and reread it, and you get more out of it every time you do. So good question, and hopefully that was some help.
Thank you very much, Craig. One follow-up before you go. I wanted to ask if, like, how frequently the Craig Biddle Show will be going on, and whether you'll be sharing more about things going on over at OSI, in particular, your guys's classes, and also Level Up 2026 that's going on.
Yeah, I'm going to be doing this every Thursdays at 4 Pacific, 7 Eastern time. There will be occasional weeks where I can't make it for some reason, and I'll let you guys know in advance. But I've wanted to do this kind of show for a long time, and my team, especially Jackson and Dylan, who get credit for prodding me to do this and getting me to finally jump and do it. And they're helping with this show, and I'll be doing this every week. Yeah, thanks. And I'm glad you guys came today and are enjoying it. I certainly am. I love talking about these ideas, and I love learning through the conversation. So I get a lot out of it. Thanks, Mark.
Thank you, Craig.
All right. Let's see what else is in the thread.
We have another written live caller, Craig.
Okay, great.
And I'll add him to the stage.
All right.
Hi, Craig. So I've only recently discovered objectivism, I'd say about maybe 8 months ago or whatever. And I've struggled in my life with a couple of I guess, well, not serious addictions, but just a couple of things that hinder what I want to achieve in life and stuff like that. And I was wondering how does the objectivist free will I guess position, how could I use that to, I guess, put my principles into action, I guess, what I want to do in life. And I guess it's a really broad and hard question, especially because it could be super idiosyncratic. But I was just wondering, maybe, yeah.
Your name is Finn, is that correct?
Yeah.
Okay. Yeah, that's a great question. And free will is a difficult issue, especially when there are a lot of seemingly good arguments against it. So the first thing you need to get your head around regarding free will is that you can see yourself making a certain kind of choice. You can see it introspectively. And that is, you can observe, literally observe introspectively, that you can increase or decrease your attention, your focus on something, right? You can decide to think, and you can decide to think even harder, right? You can decide to max out your thinking, or you can back it off and not think at all. And once you see, literally introspectively see that you can do that, and do it, you can do it to some extent now, but then spend some time over the coming days and just see yourself and say, let me see if I can focus really clearly on something, and then let me see if I can just drift and let that fade completely. And you'll see that you're able to do this. That, according to objectivism, is the locus, the home, the foundation, the place where free will resides. That's where the essence of free will is your choice to think or not to think, to activate your mind or not to activate your mind, to ramp up your level of consciousness or to ramp it down. There are different ways of saying this, but that's what the idea is. Now, once you see that, you've gone a long way, because you've now observed that you can do this thing. Now, this does not mean that you can make any choice anytime to do anything, right? I have some doors to my office right there that have glass panes in them. Here's something I cannot do right now. I cannot sprint through those doors and shatter them and jump through them. Now, why can't I do that? It seems that physically I should be able to do that, but there's a reason I can't do that. And that's because I have values and concerns and emotions and things that prohibit me from doing that. I'm like, why would I do that? I would be bloody and I'd be in the hospital a half hour later. It would ruin my day and most of my month, right? So I'm not going to do that, and I can't do it. It's not that I could do it if I really, really wanted to. I literally can't make myself do that. Now, if I had to do that in order to save my wife or daughter from something, then I could certainly do it, but that changes the circumstances. So free will doesn't mean you can make any choice anytime, anywhere, anyhow. What it means is you can choose to think or not to think. That's really the essence of it. You will get this from people who attack it. They'll go, that's ridiculous. Everyone knows that free will is impossible because we live in a mechanistic universe where every cause or every effect is caused by some prior thing taking an action, right? So if something happens, let's say you choose to think, they'll say, well, you didn't really choose to think. You were made to think by things that happened before that. You had an emotion about a value that you want, and your wanting that thing made you think, right? So it wasn't a free will choice. It was a caused choice, and it was caused by some prior event. And this is called this is a false view of the law of causality, and it's called the event view of causation, or the event view of causality. And it holds that everything that happens is caused by prior events. But it's just not true that everything that happens is caused by prior events. Everything that happens is caused by entities. It's caused by things acting in accordance with their identities, in accordance with their natures. This is the correct view of causality. And once you understand that correct view, and how do we know that's the correct view? Because we look everywhere and we can see it. If I throw a cotton ball at a pane of glass, it has a certain effect. If I throw, a rock, quartz rock at a pane of glass, it has a different effect. Why? Because of the nature of the things, the nature of the glass, the nature of a cotton ball, the nature of a quartz rock. The things have natures, and they act and interact in accordance with their identity. That is the law of causality. Now, what does this have to do with free will? It has to do with free will this way. You are a certain kind of being. You are a being who has a faculty called reason. And we know we have the faculty of reason because we use it all the time. It's the faculty we use to think. We form concepts, we form sentences, we form generalizations and propositions and abstractions and principles, and then we act on them. And that's what we do. So we know we have this faculty called reason. The thing about reason is that it operates by means of choice. And this gets back to the thing I mentioned earlier. You can see yourself choosing to think or not to think, to use reason or not to use it, to use reason or to default to the only other internal thing you have here that you can go by, your emotional faculty, which is a very good and a very important faculty. Emotions are super important, but they're just not your means of knowledge. So we shouldn't treat them as such, right? If you want to know, you have to think. And if you want to think, you have to choose to think. And you're the kind of being, a human being is a kind of being who, by its nature, has a rational faculty that operates by choice. That's just the way it is. And we know that's the way it is because we can observe that that's the way it is. So that's a primer on free will. It's a very rich subject. I wrote an article titled "Free Will: Who Has It?" that you can find on the Objective Standard website. Free Will: Who Has It is the title. And I also did a talk on free will at one of our conferences, one of our Level Up conferences, and I had a debate on free will with Alex O'Connor last summer, where I make some of the points that I just made, but I make them in the context of a debate. And Alex has a really I think Alex has the strongest argument against free will, which is essentially this. You're going to hear this if you get out in the world. So his argument is we only ever act because of two things, either because we want to do something, because we want to, or because we're forced to. That's it. And this can seem really compelling because if you go, okay, well, if we're forced to, obviously that's out of the picture. But if we're trying to think about free will and you go, okay, and then you get into the issue of, well, so I choose to think. Well, did I want to choose to think? If I didn't want to choose to think, why would I have chosen to think? Right? You see how this can be confusing. And here's the fact of the matter. Your desires can have an influence on your choices, including your choice to think, but they do not dictate, they do not force you to think. Your emotions and your desires coexist in your soul, in your mind, in your being, with your rational faculty. Emotions and desires and wants are there, and reason and free will are there. All this stuff coexists in there, and there's no reason in the world we have to say that one of these things has to always trump the other in every respect. Just because I have desires, and just because in order to think, I have to some extent desire to think, or I'm not going to think. It doesn't change the fact that the fundamental alternative that comes with a rational faculty is the choice to activate and use that faculty or not to do so. So this is why I think Alex is the best person to debate this with, is because he's got what seems to be a convincing argument for determinism, but to hold that argument, you have to drop a lot of context. You have to myopically look at the fact that every time you do something, you do it because you want to, which is perhaps true, but it doesn't change the fact that your rational faculty with the volitional mechanism attached to it exists right in there with your emotions, and that all of this is happening at once, and that you can see that you can make these choices to focus or not to, and that you can see that you can do it even when you don't want to do it. Now, you can get into the issue of, well, that means you wanted to do something else more, and Alex gets into this, so I recommend listening to the debate. But I think you'll find that helpful, and I love the subject, and I hope you enjoy that debate and the article. If you have more questions on that in the future, particularly after reading the article or watching the debate, let me know and we'll get into it.
Thank you, Craig. I just have one really quick question. It's not really related to this, but I was wondering, what's your favorite piece of objectivist nonfiction?
Favorite piece of objectivist nonfiction would be, it's a toss-up between Introduction to Objectivist Epistemology and Philosophy Who Needs It. Philosophy Who Needs It was so valuable to me in my development because of a few articles in there. The metaphysical versus the man-made was very powerful for me. Causality versus duty absolutely sealed the deal for me on understanding the correct meta-ethics and why Ayn Rand's view of rational egoism is absolutely correct. I mean, I knew substantially that it was correct from reading Virtue of Selfishness and other things, and I had done a lot of thinking on it. But when I read Causality versus Duty, it just really brightened everything up. And then also in that book is Kant versus Sullivan. Causality versus duty is about Rand's ethics versus Kant's ethics. And Kant versus Sullivan is basically about Rand's epistemology versus Kant's epistemology. And it's just a beautiful, beautiful essay that makes me cry actually when I read it. It's so powerful. So those are my two favorites there.
Hey, thank you very much. All right.
You're
See ya.
welcome. Do you have a favorite, Finn? What are your favorites?
I just read like the last piece of nonfiction I read was How We Know and stuff because I was recommended to like I haven't read ITO or Introduction to Objectivist Epistemology because isn't it like 1,000 pages and stuff?
Which book?
Introduction to Objectivist Epistemology, isn't that like?
Oh, Introduction to Objectivist Epistemology is a very brief book. In fact,
Oh,
it
is it?
was the initial essay was more of a monogram, you know, a short, a very a long essay or a short book, and then later Harry Binswanger folded into it some workshops that Rand had done with some philosophers talking about the lengthy essay. And then that was turned into a book. And I don't think it's more than, it's a couple hundred pages, maybe. I don't have, it's around here somewhere. It's a couple hundred pages. How We Know, if you're talking, are you talking about Harry Binswanger's book, How We Know?
Yeah.
Yeah, that's much longer than ITOE.
I swear, like I searched up ITO and it came up as like 1,000 pages. Maybe I'm thinking of maybe Atlas Shrugged, but yeah. I'm just
I just spotted it on the shelf here so I can tell you exactly how many pages it is. It's 306 pages, including the workshops at the end. And it's just beautifully written. The workshops are interesting, don't get me wrong, and I definitely would read those. But the essay itself, the main essay, Introduction to Objectivist Epistemology, is just a marvelously, beautifully written, succinct. It's just, and you will learn so much. Like, you know, if you know Ayn Rand's ethics at all, where, you know, the way that she derives her ethics, she asks the question, you know, what are values and why does man need them? You know, and then that starts this sort of inductive process or this reductive process, trying to figure out what these things are, what facts give rise. Another way of asking that question is what facts give rise to the need of the concept of value or morality. And if you understand that's how she solved the is-ought problem, how she grounded morality in reality, when you read ITOE, what you see is the real underlying mechanics of how she was doing the thinking that led to her solving that problem and several other issues in philosophy. So I highly recommend that book. I work with a young woman, Kaya Willis, who she's the only person I know who that was the first book she read by Ayn Rand. And she not only read it, she reread it, I think 3 times in short order because she found it so fascinating. Now, Kaya was an MIT MIT graduated data analyst. So she was very, very much into sort of technical, mathematical type thinking, and ITOE gets into that. So I can understand why she might have been that attracted to it. But even if you're not that way, and that's not, I'm not a math person, but read the book, take it slowly. And if you want, I think we're going to be doing another workshop on that book at Objective Standard Institute sometime in 2026. So you can keep your eye out for that.
Yeah, I just got I got the Fountainhead for Christmas and I've pretty much nearly finished it. So yeah, I'm gonna have to do that and then take your advice. I also want to read some of your books and stuff. I saw that on Amazon you have a couple, and yeah, I'm excited to read that. But yeah, thank you so much.
You're welcome, and welcome to the wonderful world of rational philosophy and objectivism. You're in a beautiful place, and it gets better and better as you learn more and meet some of the people. If you can manage to, either come to Objective Standard Institute's conference in July, or at least somehow engage with other people who are thinking about and studying these ideas, I highly recommend it. You'll meet some of the best people, and you make great friends, and you're in a good place, Finn.
Yeah, I nearly got into objectivism a couple years ago because there was a video game that had like one of the characters was literally named like Ayn Rand, like a sort of male version of Ayn Rand, but like I ended up going down the Nietzsche route and stuff like that because she sort of has very close, well, not like they're not completely the same, but she has like quite close relations in ethics to Nietzsche, and I didn't really agree with Nietzsche the whole way, so I sort of just dropped off, and then but eventually I found, I guess, the right version. So yeah, but
Yeah. On that note, I can't let you go without recommending an article. So there's an article in the Objective Standard Journal titled Ayn Rand Contra Nietzsche, and it was written by John Ridpath, who was a wonderful man who passed away maybe 10 years ago. And this is, I think, the last article that he published. And I worked with him and some other people on the editing process with it. But the article is beautiful because it basically goes through metaphysics, epistemology, ethics, politics, and aesthetics, looking at Ayn Rand's essential arguments and views versus Nietzsche's. And it's just, you just compare them all the way through with actual quotes from both of their works. So you get a really, really nice comparison of the two. And look, Nietzsche had some really, really interesting ideas, and he wrote beautifully against religion and Christianity in particular, which is great. But he and Ayn Rand really, really do not have any, there's no similarity in their philosophy except on a certain sense of life level in regard, in particular, in a negative sense of life level in regard to their hatred of mysticism and religion. So
yeah. Just before I leave the people and ask in chat, the game is it's a Star Wars game. It's Knights of the Old Republic 2. So that's one of the characters I think is like just pretty much an old version of Ayn Rand. So but anyway, thank you so much for having me on. So
my
see ya.
pleasure. Thanks, Finn.
Yeah.
Bye-bye. All right. So the thread has gotten long enough that I don't know whether I'm going to be doing things in the right order over here. So I'm just
Greg, I have a list of I have the order of the questions.
Oh, good. Then you go ahead and ask them. That'll be helpful. Thank you.
Okay, so the first is from Mayflower Matriarch 5284. And I don't know if that's he or she, but they ask, do you have any thoughts on the proper legal way to deal with cyber or internet wrongs, deep fakes, and the like?
Wow. Yeah, that's way out of my my sphere of knowledge. What I do know is that although this is seemingly an unprecedented situation where, with AI and the deep fakes and the things that AI can do, it seems really like a lot of mischief is going to go down, and it's already starting. We went through a situation like this, and lo and behold, the geeks, who again I'll say are the gods, there is a God and he is the geeks figured out how to deal with it. And I think they will again here, and they're already working on it. I know that. But if you remember when the internet first came out, and then shortly after the internet started, there was this period of time when banks started going on to the internet. You could do banking on the internet. And people were very concerned because like, oh my God, what, I put my password in out there, and then what if somebody gets it and gets into my account and steals all my money? So there was a need for cybersecurity. So a whole new industry arose because there was this new technology and these new values that people had, but a certain potential problem came with those values. And so that created a new industry and a new demand for some very, very smart people to figure out how to solve that problem. And that's what they did. And the whole cybersecurity industry, was born of that. And I know a few people who were involved in it and made a bunch of money, and good for them. They deserve it. And I think we're going to see the same thing with AI and deep fakes and things like that. It's already the case that you can often tell if something was written by AI, and I think I can tell when I see images, particularly of people that are, because there's images of like models, model-looking women all over the place on the internet now that are created by AI. I think dress companies are using them for advertisements, and it's all over the place. But I can still tell, or at least I think I can, when something is an AI image, and I can definitely tell when something was written by AI. AI has this writing method whereby it uncomfortably and unnaturally uses the structure. We were talking about this in an OSI philosophy discussion the other day. It'll say, it's not this, but that. Not only is this not the case, but this is the case. And it's got this this like negative, not this, but that tempo that it gets into. And look, there's nothing wrong with that kind of a formulation for a sentence. I've been using them for decades here and there in my writing, and a lot of writers do. But AI can't temper itself and figure out that that's overdoing it in that kind of thing. And that's just one of the instances in which, or one of the things in which, one of the ways in which you can tell when something has been written by AI or excessively edited by AI. And the only reason I'm bringing this stuff up is if I, with my naked eyes and ears and stuff, can tell that stuff now, I don't think it's gotten so far that that the geeks, the really intelligent, people out there who know how to code and do all this stuff, they're going to easily figure out how, I think, well, relatively easily. They'll certainly get rich doing it, and good for them. They're going to figure out how to tell what's fake, what's real. And there's a market value for this. You don't want to be faked out. And you certainly don't want to be faked out if it's going to lose you money or customers or, cause you some other problem. So you and I and everyone else, we're going to be willing to pay in some form or another, perhaps indirectly, but we'll pay for the technology that's going to solve this problem. And that's a big pot of money, and there are a lot of people out there trying to earn it. So I'm not worried about it, and I love to watch this kind of stuff happen. I love to watch technological advancement that creates whole new industries and needs, and then watch these super smart people pop up and go, I'm gonna solve this problem, and then they go do it. I love those people. All right, what other questions we have, Jackson?
Okay, so the next question is from Patrick, and he asks, couldn't drug use of any kind be considered to be acting against one's true nature, even if not considered morally wrong?
Well, so acting against one's true nature is a very loaded phrase. We definitely have a nature. We have a nature. We're rational beings. We have a faculty of reason. We're emotional beings. We have a faculty of emotion. Because of those two faculties, we're beings who need meaning and purpose in our lives. That's something that's very important to us. We need, most people need good relationships. I know there are some people who have psychological dispositions whereby they don't need relationships or the like. So I'm just acknowledging that they're out there, but they're a very small percentage. So we have these needs because of the kind of beings that we are. And one of the things that we like to do on occasion is kick back and relax. You've had a long day at work. It's hard to get everything off your mind. You pop a beer, sit down with your buddies, and you drink a beer. And I don't understand what in your nature there would be what in your nature you're violating there by drinking a beer or having a coffee in the morning. And the reason I'm starting with beer and coffee is because these are drugs, and people can argue, you can try to argue that they're not drugs, but that doesn't go very well because they just are. And what I'm trying to do is establish the fact that yes, we have a nature and we have needs within that nature, and some of those needs are satisfied by things like coffee and beer. And perhaps in some cases, they're satisfied by marijuana. I had a brother who tragically died this past year, who, because of a birth defect that he had, lived particularly the latter part of his life, but even some of the earlier part of his life, in severe pain, constant severe back pain. And the only thing that could mitigate his pain was a combination of marijuana and some other prescription drugs. And so he used that stuff all the time. And was there something in his nature that was against? It doesn't make any sense to me. So what does the person have any specific thing in mind? If you can type it in, what is it about the nature of human beings that you think coffee or beer or smoking a joint would be against? Now, if we get to the harder drugs that, like, I think cocaine probably is really, really just bad for you. I've done it. I did it in my teens. And I remember the weird, very sort of shaky high that comes with it. And I had friends who even got addicted to it. So I know that it can be very addictive. And I doubt that drug does anything good. I think it's probably just really, really bad for you. But things like psilocybin, from what I have read and heard, I don't know that it has any long-term or any negative effects at all. If it does, and that's just a fact, then those negative effects should be taken into account if you're going to use them. Just like the negative effects of alcohol should be taken into account if you're going to use them. If you drink too much alcohol, you will destroy your life. You'll destroy your brain, your mind, your life, and everything. So you have to approach alcohol with the idea, oh, this is a drug. I'm going to use it very carefully and with respect to its actual nature and with respect to my nature. And then I think you can do it. And if you're a person who can't limit yourself to reasonable amounts of things, then don't take any of them. I would, I'm not advocating drug use. I'm saying be thoughtful about it. And when people start talking about moral right and wrong with respect to drugs, they can't just say it's wrong and then not provide the principle by reference to which it's wrong. Because things aren't wrong except by reference to a principle. That's what it means for something to be wrong. It's anti-life in some way. And then you've got to figure out if that's the case. And if it is, then you don't want to do things that are against your life. That would be very bad. But it's not at all clear to me that drug use, including certain recreational drug use, is anti-life. I don't see it. Any other questions, Jackson?
Yep. So next question. This is from PosoCap. How do you approach mystics, specifically those who are on the deep end of supernatural beliefs? Do you have to start with epistemology?
Well, it depends on what the mystic is calling for you to do. Mystics, unfortunately, don't just limit themselves to saying, I know because of faith, or I know because my group said so. They go on to try to enact laws and whether theocratic laws or socialist laws, redistributive laws, or the like. So unfortunately, it wouldn't be so bad if they just stayed down there in epistemology and had their stupid theories and didn't do anything with them. The problem is they act on those theories. That's why I said earlier, you might not be interested in epistemology, but it's interested in you. So when you're dealing with mystics, it depends on what level you're at. If you're dealing with mystics in Congress who want to pass, laws against abortion because they think that a fetus has a soul that was implanted by God, and who are you to, flush this soul out of a woman, or whatever their thinking or lack of thinking on this is. You're not going to do well to just try to have an epistemological argument with them. And I mean, if you go to them and you go, look, you're holding all of this on faith, and faith isn't the means of knowledge. So I got to inform you, you're not doing well here. You're really being irrational. That's not the place to do it, because the congressmen who have already made their minds up on this stuff, they're not interested in your views on epistemology. They're interested in passing a law to force women to give birth to babies they may not want to have. So yeah, you have to look at the circumstances and the context in question, and then decide how to deal with it. Generally, when you're if you're in a conversation with a mystic and and you're talking about epistemology, I think the thing to do there is say, look, why do you think that faith is a means of knowledge? And if he says, well, I don't think it's a means of knowledge, just go with faith first. One thing you might do next then is say, okay, well, so are you going to agree with me then that faith is not a means of knowledge? Not just that they're not saying that it is a means of knowledge. Try to get them to say that it is not a means of knowledge. I've tried this with religionists. They do not like it. I was in a debate with David Walpe, a Harvard rabbi, and I asked him this question. I had said, that religion treats faith as a means of knowledge. And he said with incredulity, he was like, I've never heard anybody say that. That's ridiculous. Nobody says faith is a means of knowledge. That's an atheist straw man version of what we religious people think. And so I said, okay, well, if you don't think faith is a means of knowledge, would you agree with me that it is not a means of knowledge? And he said, I will not answer that question. This is on tape. You can go look at it. He wouldn't answer that question. I had a conversation with Zach Porcu a couple weeks ago also, and we got into that same question toward the end of the discussion. I like Zach, by the way. He was very thoughtful, and we had a nice conversation. And I didn't get, we didn't get too far into this, but toward the end of the conversation, we started talking about faith. And he too said that his version of Christianity, which is Eastern Orthodox, does not hold that faith is a means of knowledge. And I said, well, then would you agree that it's not a means of knowledge? And he paused for a second, and I think his exact words were, he said, that's a very clever argument. And so it is. It's clever only in the sense that it's pushing them to make a decision. Because here's the thing: if faith is a means of knowledge, we're all screwed. Because it means that anytime anyone has faith that they should do something, they should do it. That's bad. The good news is faith isn't a means of knowledge. And if people agree that it's not a means of knowledge, here's what we get to all agree on after that. If a religious person says, I agree, faith is not a means of knowledge, then we get to say, awesome. So from now on, everything that anyone ever claims to know by means of faith, we can say that's nonsense. Literal nonsense. It doesn't make it to the sensory level. It's nonsense. So this is why religious people don't like this argument. They don't like having to agree that faith is not a means of knowledge, even though they're going to tell you that they don't think that faith is a means of knowledge. So that's what I would do with mystics, at least the faith version of mystics. The mystics who hold that consensus is a means of knowledge, they're a different kettle of fish, and you have to deal with them accordingly. They're not saying it's true because I believe it. They're saying it's true because the consensus holds it. And all you can do there is just point out, so your epistemological principle is exactly the same thing as the logical fallacy called appeal to the masses. That's what it is. If they go, well, things are true because the group says so, that's literally the meaning of the fallacy appeal to the masses, or appeal to, sometimes it'll be appeal to authority, because they're going to say, well, the group has the authority, so then it's a version of appeal to authority. But then their epistemology is a logical fallacy. And so, yeah, that's, I like the idea of people talking. Here's what I'd love to see in the culture. You guys want to do some really, really heavy lifting? Here's an idea. Start talking about yourself as a person of reason. Talking about, start referring to religious people as people of faith, and start referring to postmodernists and wokeists and the like as people of consensus. So we have three different kinds of people: people of reason, people of faith, people of consensus. Which one are you, and why? It's a really good question. I think that people who treat faith as a means of knowledge should be embarrassed for doing it, because it's just ridiculous. And I think that people who treat consensus as a means of knowledge should be embarrassed for doing that. So I like labeling them that way and letting them have to deal with that fact. So anyway, that would be at least one of my suggestions in regard to mysticism. All right, let's take one more question, and then I'm going to get some dinner.
Okay. So the last question we have in queue is, how is entities acting different from events? And this was in context to an earlier part of the live stream.
Yeah, good question. So let's think of a pool, think of a billiards table. So if I pick up a billiards cue and I hit the cue ball, and it rolls down the table and hits the 8 ball, and the 8 ball goes into the pocket. So there are different ways you could look at this. We have an event for sure. The event was I pushed the cue, and it then hit the cue ball, the white ball. That then rolled down the table and hit the 8 ball, and it went into the pocket. These are definitely events. There's a series of events. One of these events came first, and in a sense, it seems to be the thing that caused the rest of the things to happen. But now let's look at this more closely. What are the things involved? Well, the things involved are a person, a cue, a stick of wood, a table with a certain kind of felt on it, a cue ball with a certain consistency and hardness and shape, another ball with a consistency and hardness and shape. All of these things have certain identities. And what they're going to do at any given time is a function of what they are, not necessarily what happens before it. So I'll give you another example. Let's say I pick up the cue stick and I go and I hit the white ball, and it rolls down the table, and that ball hits the black ball, the 8 ball, but the 8 ball doesn't budge. Now, the reason the 8 ball didn't budge in this case is somebody had crazy glued the 8 ball to the billiard table. Now, the nature of the entities changed. This isn't just a cube. This isn't just an 8 ball sitting on a table. It's an 8 ball glued to the table. So the context has changed. The entity has changed. And now we have the exact same events. Me, the person, and the stick, and the white ball, and all of the events were the same, but that ball didn't move. On the event view of causation, it should have moved. But it didn't. Why? Because the entity that got hit was a different kind of entity. It wasn't a freestanding ball. It was a glued ball. So it's true that when events happen, the things that are involved in the events, the things that act and interact, do cause sequences of events. It's not that events aren't things or that events don't exist. It's that events are not the fundamental when we're talking about causation. The fundamental is the things acting that cause the events. to take place. And so it's hard to initially, because you've probably been hearing over many years, as everyone has, that the law of causality is all about events happen. Things happen because of some prior, some prior event. And if you stay there, you're certainly going to have trouble understanding free will, because that's one of the areas where this false view of causation becomes really apparent. But this kind of event causation versus entity causation is extremely valuable to understand, even at the level of things like politics and romance, and much different things. Take politics, and I don't want to go too deep today, so we'll take romance for another day on this. A theocratic dictatorship is a certain kind of thing, right? It has a nature. It's a government that is run by religious laws that allegedly come from a supernatural being. And the government is going to uphold these laws using force to ensure that people do the thing this alleged God, wants them to do. It has a nature. To know that a thing is going to act in accordance with its nature is very important, because we don't have to say, oh, look, the government did this thing and caused a series of events, and then we're just blaming the events for things. We don't want to blame the events. We want to blame the thing. We want to blame. We want the blame to go where it belongs. The theocratic dictatorship is the problem. That's why the gay people got hung, or the protesters got shot for disobeying Allah or whatever. And this is happening right now in Iran. So it's very important to understand that things act in accordance with their identities, not only billiard balls, but also governments and everything in between. Things have a nature. Whatever that nature is, that is how they're going to act, one way or the other. Our nature at the level of free will happens to be that we have this very strange aspect of which, granted, we don't see elsewhere in nature, but we have this capacity to choose. And we can go one way or the other at any given moment in terms of thinking or not thinking, going by reason or defaulting to emotion. So that's the significance of the difference between event causation and entity causation. And of course, entity causation includes agent causation. You'll sometimes hear it called agent causation, but agent in this case just means the person or the being who is, could be an animal taking the action. So that's the agent, but it's an entity. An agent is a kind of an entity. So yeah, good question. In my article on free will, you'll see some more on this. So I recommend reading that, and then think about it. These things, most of these kinds of issues, you have to kind of stew over them and chew them a bit, and look for instances and challenge them. And anytime you hear something new that sort of strikes you as, I hadn't thought about that before, think about it critically. Try to attack it from various angles and see whether you can, whether it holds water and makes sense over time, or whether it doesn't. So this is an instance of that. If this is the first time you're hearing about the difference between agent or entity causation and event causation, don't just take my word for it. Think about it and look and see if you can see any instances of events happening that are not happening because of the nature of the entities acting and interacting. That would be a good way to think about it. Okay, we're a little over 2 hours today for the first of these episodes. I think that's good. That was a lot of fun. I love talking about these ideas. You guys ask great questions. So I hope you'll come back again next Thursday. We'll do it again. Hopefully we'll have fewer technical problems, and thank you for being patient with us this week. Thank you, Jackson, for getting this all set up and having relatively few problems. I think it went really well, and I appreciate your help with everything.
You're welcome. Thank you, everyone.
All right, guys and gals, have a great evening, and we'll see you next week.
Bye, guys.